It is that time again, that moment in space when we bring the bells together and invoke the spirit of remediation. Take out that Unit 3 remediation worksheet. We got to go fast, fast, fast. This is yours truly, Mr. Spicer, over in room 255. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at TSpiceWSHS. But for now, why don't you follow me as we go through the Civil War? We're going quick. Let's go. If you got a big problem, there must have been reasons for the problem, obviously. Back up slide. There we go. Sectional disagreements and debates over tariffs. That's one part. But what do we mean by sectional? It means the different sections of the country, specifically North versus South. So they're going after each other over tariffs. Also, the extension of slavery into the territory and the nature of the Union states' rights stuff. And everybody wants to say, hey, what's the cause of Civil War? Slavery? Yeah, you're right. Let's be specific that we're talking about slavery going into the territories. Must get not like slavery extending is the problem. Okay. While this is going on, we're gonna have arguments between Northern abolitionists, meaning those against slavery, people like this gentleman pictured Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison. And then on the South, people are going to defend slavery and say, hey, slavery is not a bad thing. Some will say it's even a good thing. They'll say that the Northern factories are the problem. So abolitionists and Southern defenders of slavery are going after each other. Supreme Court decision, very important, in 1857, is the Dred Scott decision. Dred Scott is a slave who was in a free territory for a period of time. He sued for his freedom, saying, hey, Supreme Court, I shouldn't be a slave anymore. And they said, well, you're going to be a slave because blacks could never be citizens of the United States. Therefore, you shouldn't even be in court. Slavery is fine. It can extend. Second part is the court says the Compromise of 1820, that Missouri Compromise, it's bogus. It's unconstitutional. Slavery can go far into the territories. So that really was a victory for the South and a huge defeat for the North. All right. Also a book. Harriet Beecher Stowe, a young Northern woman, writes Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was a best-selling novel which inflamed, really ignited Northern abolitionist sentiment. It was the second-selling book behind the Bible, so it sold a lot of copies. And it's important because it's not like people are just reading the newspaper and hearing about slavery. No, their favorite book is about the horrors of slavery. So Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin was very important as well. Okay, there were a lot of really bad compromises over slavery. Now, I'm sure you all remember them very well from your Unit 2 remediation video, but real quick, let's go. Missouri Compromise said Missouri is a free state, Missouri is a slave state, but Maine balances out as a free state. And we're going to draw a line, the 3630 line, meaning below it, slave states, above it, free states. And everything will be great. It'll all work out well. No, because in 1850, the problem is all the land gained from the Mexican War. California is going to come in as a free state according to the Compromise of 1850. The other areas from the war that were gained will decide for themselves. Well, that sounds like that's great for the free people. What do the slave people get? South gets the fugitive slave law, which says that in the North, if there's a runaway slave, they can be apprehended. You have to tell on them basically and say, hey, this is a runaway slave, and send them back into slavery. Doesn't really work either. Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 repeals the Missouri Compromise, says, okay, officially get rid of this thing, allows the people of Kansas and Nebraska to decide for themselves. That's called popular sovereignty, if you remember. Okay, what's the point, Spicer? Well, the point is that all these compromises didn't really work out. Now, especially in the 50s, there were really bad presidents, especially the worst president ever. President James Buchanan, pictured here, looks like and was and is considered to be by most scholars the worst president ever. He was a president before Lincoln. And so while all those compromises, while everything's falling apart, they kind of just let the thing build and build and build up to the Civil War. Okay, look at that picture. No, I'm sorry. Come on, man. I know it's tough, Buchanan being all horrible, but at least stand and smile. Election of 1860. Lincoln's got a little bit of a smile on him. We all know that Mr. Abraham Lincoln's going to become president with the election of 1860. The fear among people in the South is that Lincoln would abolish slavery. He didn't say, I'm going to abolish slavery, but they all thought that he would, at least people in the Deep South. So 7 southern states who fear this seceded. Here they are at the bottom. Those are the Deep South states, right? Not the Upper South. They'll come later. Well, let's talk a little bit about Lincoln before we get to that. President of the United States during the war, we know that. He believes that the Union should be held together, that there's no such thing as secession. It's actually even real because the states must always be kept together. And he's not afraid to use force if he thinks that's what's necessary. He'll use force if necessary. Hey, there must have been a president on the Confederate side, and there was. President is Jefferson Davis. Actually, he used to be a U.S. Senator. He was a United States Senator from Mississippi, and he was a veteran in the Mexican-American War. So this is like, yeah, big American guy. Well, once the Civil War comes, he'll become the President of the Confederate States of America, former Senator Jefferson Davis. Okay, first confrontation, first battle, first shots, whatever you want to say. The first is all about Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor in South Carolina. There's a fort that, as a military fort, Southerners say, well, it's ours now because it's in South Carolina. We have left. And the military says, well, we're not really going to leave. And then it gets fired on. And the Confederates will actually get control of it. So it's kind of a victory for them, but it means this war thing, it's a real deal. Okay? So real that Lincoln's going to respond by calling for federal troops. In 1861, the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter causes Lincoln to call for troops. This is actually considered to be a cause of the war because once you have troops, this thing is on. Like, let's talk about some generals that are going to fight in this war. Ulysses S. Grant is the overall #1 dude that you need to know for the Union Army. Okay, he's going to be the Union military commander. He's going to win victories over the South. After a lot of Union commanders, they're not going to do so well. Who's the Southern guy? Well, I'm blocking him right now. You can see the skosh of the top of his head, but it's Robert E. Lee. He is the Confederate general of the Army of Northern Virginia. Now he's going to oppose secession. He's basically going to say, I don't think it was good that all these states left the Union, including my own state of Virginia, which is going to leave after Fort Sumter is fired upon. But he doesn't think that it's right for Lincoln to call the troops. He doesn't think it's right for the North to hold the country together by force. So that's why he's fighting. And he actually does very well. Confederacy does well in the early battles of the Civil War, but things get real interesting at Antietam, close to the town of Sharpsburg. We are in Maryland. Maryland's going to be still with the Union here. So this is Lee's invasion of the North. Lee goes up to the North, but he doesn't succeed in battle. If you actually look at the battle, it was a tie. But afterwards, Lee had to go back south. So it was portrayed as a Union victory. The most important thing you need to know is after Antietam, those positive vibes that Lincoln has allows him to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. What did the Emancipation Proclamation do? Mr. Spicer? Freed all the slaves? No. Let's be specific. It freed slaves located in the southern states that had seceded. Only the states that had left would have their slaves be free. It does not free slaves everywhere. But it is going to make the abolition of slavery a Northern war aim. So yeah, it's a war about Union. It's also going to be a war about ending slavery in those rebelling states. Also, discourages interference for European nations. England, for a while, looked like might help out the Confederacy. EP, the Emancipation Proclamation, says, hey, stay out of our biz. Also, and very important, the Emancipation Proclamation allows African American troops to fight in the Union Army. I'd say who pushed for that was this guy. Frederick Douglass, that abolitionist, he urged Lincoln to recruit former black slaves and free blacks to fight in the Union Army, and they did. So important in this war that has so much to do with slavery that the North has African American soldiers, okay? All right, so that's one thing. Here's another big battle. Gettysburg. You probably remember Gettysburg as like, oh, Gettysburg, that's the one I remember from 4th grade or 7th grade, I believe is when you guys had U.S. history last. It's the most important battle in a lot of ways because it's the turning point of the war. Where at Antietam, it was kind of a tie. At Gettysburg, the North clearly won. This was Lee's second invasion of the North. It is one of the biggest battles of the war. And after it's done, Lee lost. Lee and the South go back to the South. They'll never go back up north. It is kind of downhill from here. So understand Gettysburg, that turning point of the war. November, after the battle was in July, November, they have a cemetery for so many of the dead that had fallen at Gettysburg. Lincoln goes there. He says some nice words. It's called the Gettysburg Address. Couple key quotes. He says that this nation is dedicated to the proposition, that's like the belief, that all men are created equal. And then he says that the America was a nation ruled of the people, by the people, and for the people. So we are a democratic country formed to stick together. We're not going to get broken up. And if we talk about being created for the proposition that all men are created equal, then this slavery thing has got to get fixed, and the Emancipation Proclamation is a good way to start. Okay, so understand, as we've said before, Lincoln's big philosophy is the Union must be held together. Okay, 1865, I said turning point was at Gettysburg. It ends at Appomattox. At Appomattox, which is in Virginia, Lee surrenders to Grant. Now, lots of Southerners said, hey, let's go up in the mountains. Let's just fight a guerrilla war. Lee says, nope, let's just accept the defeat and unite as America again. War's over at Appomattox, okay? War's over, we got to reconstruct this country. So I'm being redundant. That means I'm repeating myself a lot. Lincoln is of the belief that the nation must stay together, that secession was illegal. Okay, we get it, right? Also, Lincoln was going to be kind of gentle to the South. He was not going after big punishments. He was going to be lenient. His quote is with malice towards none and charity for all. Bind up our nation's wounds. Lincoln was going to take it easy on the South. Unfortunately for Lincoln and for the South, John Wilkes Booth didn't take it easy on Abraham Lincoln. He assassinates him April 15th of 1865. With Lincoln out, excuse me, the radical Republicans come in. They are going to do two things. They're going to want to punish the Confederate States, and they're going to want to push for broader rights for African Americans. Okay? And one guy they don't like is going to be Andrew Johnson. He was Lincoln's vice president. When Lincoln dies, he becomes pres. They thought he was too easy on the South. They did battle, and they even impeached him. Impeach means the House of Representatives put him on trial to be kicked out. The Senate is actually the one who decides. The Senate acquitted. It decided he was not guilty of what he was being charged of. So he gets impeached. He doesn't get removed from office, but that's not a good thing. Not a good thing. End of Reconstruction. Reconstruction will end with the election of 1876. Okay, Rutherford B. Hayes gets elected. It was kind of an interesting deal where lots of Southern Democrats voted for him. It's a contested election. And they said, all right, once you come in, then these troops, because the military was in the South, that was part of the way that the radical Republicans punished the South, they've got to leave. Reconstruction has to end. And the Compromise of 1877 is what is going to end Reconstruction. Okay, the three big things that you really got to know from Reconstruction are the big amendments, numbers 13, 14, and 15. 13 abolished slavery. Slavery is gone. 14 gave full rights under the law to all Americans. This is full citizenship, equal protection. Okay? And 15th Amendment guaranteed the vote regardless of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Easy. Just think of it this way. 13, slavery's gone. Okay, so these African Americans, what are they? 14th says they're citizens. African Americans get full citizenship. 15th says, let's take it further. Let's give the right to vote to African American men. Women were not going to get the vote until later. Okay, real quick, economic impact. Things are horrible in the South. Okay, lots of economic distress. Farms, railroads, factories gone. Not good. There's a picture of Atlanta. In the North, things are much better. They have a strong industrial economy in the North. Common soldiers' life is not good, especially in the South. Soldiers went back home and they saw their war had wrecked their homes. Women helped out greatly in the Civil War. They managed homes, took roles in nursing and war industry. Post-war leaders. Grant, when he was president, he's going to be president, he wanted to take it easy on the South. He was more like Lincoln. Lee becomes a president of Washington colleges. He's going to emphasize the importance of keeping the nation together. Frederick Douglass is going to push for the federal government to protect the rights of freedmen. I know I went fast. You could pause the video later. Goodbye, my friends.